Picture an ordinary evening on a bustling Philadelphia street, a scene awash in the headlights of passing cars and the soft glow of street lamps. People hurry home, to late-night jobs, or toward cozy cafe nooks. The city's heartbeat is steady, constant. And yet, one fateful night, in the midst of that routine flow, a single traffic stop becomes a spark that will ignite a blazing conflagration of controversy. A black woman, running simple errands, crosses paths with a police officer whose prejudice runs deeper than anyone suspects. In a shocking turn of events, it's his very own body cam that exposes an unimaginable secret changing countless lives forever. Alicia Carter had just swung out of a Starbucks in central Philadelphia, a caramel latte clutched in her hand. She was tired after a long day at the non-profit she co-founded, Youth Rising, which provided mentorship programs for underprivileged teens. In her late 20s, Alicia stood about 5'7", with dark braids pulled away from her face. Her colleagues liked to call her Miss Sunshine, because she was always wearing a warm, earnest smile, even when faced with adversity. And Alicia had faced her fair share of adversity in this city she both loved and feared. Growing up on the outskirts of West Philadelphia, she had learned how to navigate the subtle and not so subtle experiences of racism. Her mother used to call them barriers. With time, Alicia had found her own coping strategies, channeling her frustration and heartbreak into building a safe space for disadvantaged youth. She believed the city had promise that people could transform if only given the chance. And perhaps that belief in human potential was what lulled her into complacency that evening, while strolling back to her car in the luminescent darkness of a Philly summer night. Climbing into her silver sedan, an older model Honda Civic that had been her reliable companion since college, Alicia tossed her Starbucks cup into the Q folder and readied her seatbelt. It was nearly 10 p.m., but the sidewalks were still buzzing with movement. She turned the key, heard the engine hum, and pulled out onto Walnut Street. Little did she know, a patrol car was parked half a block behind her, half hidden by a flickering streetlight. At the wheel was Officer Bradley Owens, a 14-year veteran of the Philadelphia Police Department. He had spent the better part of his early career in quieter suburbs, but was recently transferred to the heart of the city due to staff reshuffling. Officer Owens had a rugged, weary look about him. Deep lines scored his forehead, etched by years of cynicism. He wore his uniform with a stiffness that suggested an inflated sense of authority and carried around an air of impatience that flared unpredictably. That night, his partner had called in sick, leaving him to patrol alone. Truth be told, though, Owens preferred being alone. Over the years, he'd convinced himself that too many people, partners, superiors, and especially civilians he deemed suspicious, slowed him down. He had a particular brand of resentment that churned in him whenever he dealt with what he privately termed neighborhood troublemakers. His track record brimmed with reports of questionable stops, though never enough evidence to fully indict him. Yet complaints followed him like a shadow, including from fellow officers who found his hostility unsettling. But in a sprawling department, overshadowed by endless controversies and resource constraints, his superiors often let smaller transgressions slide. They had bigger fires to put out. On that muggy Philadelphia night, Owens's eye had locked on Alicia's sedan for no overt reason other than a vague sense that something about the driver looked off. He flipped on his headlights and rolled out behind her. Alicia had no inkling she was being tailed. She was thinking about tomorrow's big event at Youth Rising, an open house job fair for local teens. They had invited city council members and local businesses, including a couple of representatives from the iconic Philadelphia cheesesteak shops that dominated tourist attractions. If everything went well, dozens of young people might walk away with new opportunities. As she navigated through the city's labyrinth of one-way streets, Alicia slowed at a stop sign. Then, with caution, she made a complete stop. Out of habit, she flipped her blinker for a left turn. Calm and lawful, as always. Meanwhile, Officer Owens hovered behind her, with the patience of a predator stalking prey. When Alicia finally proceeded, he punched the accelerator, flicked on his siren, and flashed the police cruiser's lights. The screeching wail behind her made her heart jolt. She glanced in the rearview mirror. Red and blue lights danced. Alicia's immediate thought was, what could I have possibly done wrong? She eased over to the curb, anxiety turning her stomach sour. She turned off her engine and rolled down the window as the cruiser slid in behind, effectively trapping her. She could see the silhouette of a tall, broad-shouldered man emerge, the angled brim of his police hat overshadowing his features. While Alicia watched him approach, she felt an uneasy chill. She tried to calm herself. Don't panic. You're not speeding. You didn't run a light. But she knew that sometimes, especially for a black driver in America, compliance didn't guarantee fairness. Officer Owens stalked up to the driver's side window, shining his flashlight in her eyes. She squinted against the glare. The blast of light was so intense she couldn't make out his features. But she heard the clipped aggression in his tone. "License and registration," he demanded. His voice was cold steel. There was no polite introduction, no mention of why she was being pulled over. Alicia, though surprised, forced a polite smile. "Certainly, officer," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "May I ask why I'm being stopped?" "License and registration," he repeated. Ignoring her question, she could feel her pulse quickening. With slow, careful movements, she reached into her glove compartment for the registration, then retrieved her driver's license from her purse. She handed them over. As he snatched them, his flashlight roamed across the interior of her car, lingering on the Starbucks cup, the organizational flyers, her cell phone. "Do you know why I stopped you?" he asked finally, not waiting for her to answer. "Suspicious driving. And there's a possibility your brake light is out." Alicia swallowed. She recognized a flimsy excuse when she heard one. Yet she answered calmly, "I'm sorry, officer. I wasn't aware of any issues with my brake lights. Is there something else I might have done?" He leaned in closer, overshadowing her window, the stench of coffee and stale gum drifting from his breath. "Step out of the car, ma'am." Her heart sank into her stomach. Step out of the car? Usually, an officer might run her license first. She glanced at his badge, Bradley Owens. The name vaguely rang a bell, but she couldn't place it. She gripped the steering wheel, trying to steady the sudden trembling in her hands. "Is that really necessary, Officer Owens?" "I haven't done anything. I told you to step out," he snapped, cutting her off. Alicia unbuckled, heart pounding. She slowly opened the door and stepped onto the sidewalk. The night air felt suffocating. A passing couple slowed down, momentarily curious, but then a harsh glare from Owens chased them away. Alicia had a fleeting urge to call out for them to stay, to witness what was happening. But in her years of experience, she'd seen bystanders either record or retreat. Not many dared to intervene. Officer Owens jerked his chin, directing her to the back of the vehicle. "Hands on the trunk," he ordered. Alicia's breathing turned shallow. She set her palms on the smooth metal of her trunk, pulse hammering like a drum beat. She forced her gaze forward, away from him, trying to stave off the humiliation washing over her. Her mind spun. Is he going to search me? On what grounds? He patted her down in brisk, forceful motions that were borderline invasive. Alicia felt anger rising in her, but she also knew any resistance might escalate the danger. She wanted to scream that this was wrong, that this was harassment, yet she bit her lip. He finished the pat down, apparently finding nothing but the tension in the air was electric. "Stay here," he growled, walking back to check her license and registration on his dashboard computer. The police cruiser's headlights framed Alicia as she stood, arms stiff at her sides, the city swirling around her, but feeling miles away. She could feel the stares of random passers-by, some likely pitying, some curious, and some rushing away to avoid getting involved. While Owen scanned her credentials, Alicia tried to calm herself, controlling her breathing. She thought, "This can't be real." Alicia was no stranger to the anecdotal stories of innocent black motorists being stopped on flimsy pretexts. But this level of hostility was something else. After a minute, Officer Owens reapproached her, a scowl etched into his face. "What are you doing out here at this hour?" he demanded. "Coming from Starbucks," she answered, keeping her voice steady. "I work late sometimes. My job requires," he cut her off. "We've had reports of suspicious vehicles in this area. Are you aware your tags are expired?" She felt confusion. Expired? They shouldn't be. "I renewed them online 2 months ago." She always prided herself on staying ahead of such things to avoid any trouble. "Well, the system's not showing it. I'm going to have to bring you in." Alicia felt a hot jolt of panic. "That doesn't make sense, officer. I have the documents in my car." "I can show you. I've heard it all before," he said, voice laced with condescension. "Now turn around and put your hands behind your back." Alicia's mind swirled, her heart about to burst through her chest. The scenario had escalated beyond reason. She stared at him, eyes wide, uncertain whether to comply or protest. But in her peripheral vision, she noticed something, a small blinking light on his chest. The officer was wearing his standard-issue body camera. It was on, or so it appeared. This fact struck her simultaneously as a relief and a concern. Would the footage protect her, or would it vanish or be manipulated in some twisted way? She let out a slow breath and gave a meek nod. She turned, placed her hands behind her, and felt the cold clamp of handcuffs on her wrists. The metal bit into her flesh. Anger, humiliation, and fear curdled inside her. This was the sort of scenario she'd warned the young men and women at her non-profit about: how to stay calm, how to not resist, how to pray the system might defend them if they were innocent. Now she was living that nightmare, uncertain if it would spiral into violence. Owens guided her to the back seat of his cruiser. As she slid into the cramped space, a flurry of thoughts assaulted her. This must be a mistake. He's definitely profiling me. But I can prove my registration is valid. This can't stand. She focused on the single hope that the body cam might document everything. If it were working, the footage would confirm her compliance, the lack of any cause for arrest, and the officer's blatant intimidation. The drive to the precinct was tense. Alicia's breath grew ragged, arms stiff from the awkward angle behind her. She worried about her car, left behind on the roadside. She worried about how her parents would react if they found out, or the kids at Youth Rising. A swirl of humiliating stories about wrongful arrests battered her consciousness, but she steadied herself with the knowledge that the truth was on her side. Once they realized the registration wasn't expired, they'd have to let her go. Yet, ironically, that was just the beginning of the ordeal. When they arrived at the station, the fluorescent lights in the booking area made everything feel surreal, too bright, too disorienting. Officer Owens escorted her in with a tight grip on her arm, as though she were an armed felon. The desk sergeant raised a brow at Alicia's calm demeanor and the shadow of vindictiveness in Owens's eyes. "You got a suspect?" the sergeant asked. "What's the charge?" "Expired tags," Owens answered dismissively. "Possible forging of official documents." She claims she renewed them. The sergeant gave Alicia a once-over. "MAAM, do you have any documentation?" "They're in my car," she explained through clenched teeth, frustration building. "It was all online. Officer Owens wouldn't let me show him." Owens jerked her forward. "We'll figure it out later." "You're not going anywhere until we verify everything." He guided her through the booking steps, ignoring her attempts to speak. They took her fingerprints, snapped her mugshot. Alicia could scarcely believe it. All around her, other detainees were being booked for fights, theft, or who knew what else. She was a law-abiding professional, stuffed into a police station for no legitimate reason. The humiliation was a slow, burning ache inside. Finally, they placed her in a small holding cell, the dull grey walls closing in on her. The cold bench was unforgiving. She tried to blink back tears, unwilling to give in to that level of vulnerability. A single question hammered at her brain. Why is he doing this to me? A swirl of memories from earlier in the night rose up. Had there been something else that might have triggered him? Or was it purely the color of her skin? Minutes turned to hours, and no one came to release her. She waited, feeling a strange mixture of fury and powerlessness. Whenever an officer passed, she asked politely about her situation, to which they shrugged and said they had to confirm details. She began to suspect that Officer Owens was delaying the process deliberately. At one point, she glimpsed him across the booking area, leaning casually against a wall, talking to another officer. Their laughter carried across the space, stinging her ears. How easy it was for him, how painfully humiliating for her. She wondered if the body camera was still recording. She prayed that at least the initial footage was saved somewhere, secure from tampering. By the time morning light filtered through high, barred windows, Alicia's eyes were gritty from lack of sleep. Her throat felt dry, and her entire body ached from the stiff bench. Finally, a different uniformed officer arrived. This one introduced himself as Sergeant Lionel Reynolds. He was older, with kind eyes that flickered with both concern and exasperation. She could hear in his voice the labor of a man who was perpetually cleaning up other people's messes. "I'm sorry about this, Miss Carter," he said through the bars, scanning a clipboard. "We finally got the verification from the DMV. Your tags are valid, renewed, and in perfect standing. I'm going to have you released immediately. Let's get you out of here." Relief flooded through her, but so did indignation. "Thank you, Sergeant. But I want to file a complaint against Officer Owens for wrongful arrest and harassment." This was outrageous. Sergeant Reynolds, looking a bit wary, nodded. "I'll help you with the paperwork. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. This shouldn't have happened." Alicia didn't respond. Her anger was too raw to accept the apology so easily. Within minutes, she was out of the cell, reclaiming her purse and phone at the desk. She signed a few forms and moved into a side office with the sergeant to fill out a complaint. She described everything: the stop, the forced search, the excuses, the denial of her documentation. Sergeant Reynolds diligently took notes, eyebrows tightening at intervals. When they were done, Alicia demanded a copy of the official complaint, which he obliged. As she prepared to leave, her voice trembled slightly. "Will anything come of this? Or am I just going to be brushed aside?" Reynolds sighed. "We do have a procedure, Miss Carter. There will be an internal affairs review, and they'll likely interview you. There might be dash cam or body cam footage. If that footage aligns with your story, there could be consequences for Owens." Alicia's eyes flared with fresh hope. "Wait, so they can access his body cam recordings, correct?" It was on. "Yes. Barring technical malfunctions. That footage should be there," he responded. "We'll definitely investigate." She let out a breath. For the first time that day, she felt a glimmer of optimism. Maybe the system could work in her favor. Maybe justice could prevail. When Alicia returned to the street outside the precinct, she saw that her Honda had been towed. She had to pay a fee to retrieve it, which only stoked her anger. She called a friend to pick her up and take her to the impound lot. During the ride, she vented in frustration, explaining every harrowing detail. Her friend, a young attorney named Jasmine Lee, was furious. By the time they arrived at the lot, Jasmine was already planning how to proceed with legal measures. Alicia felt grateful for such unwavering support. They retrieved the Honda, and Alicia was finally able to drive home in the morning sunlight. Exhausted though she was, she knew she couldn't just let this pass. She dreaded telling her parents, especially her mother, who had always worried about Alicia getting into an encounter with the wrong police officer at the wrong time. Alicia decided she would handle it in her own way first. There was too much at stake: her career, her non-profit's reputation, and her own sense of dignity. Within days, word spread among Alicia's circle. The local community activists, people she'd met through Youth Rising, encouraged her to go public. Police brutality and harassment are too common, they argued. We have to hold them accountable. Alicia was torn. She'd always believed that not every police officer was out to harm black citizens, that some truly wanted to protect and serve. But her faith had been badly shaken. The best she could do was trust in the truth of the body cam footage. What Alicia didn't know, and what would later prove explosive, was that Officer Owens's body cam had captured far more than just her unwarranted arrest. In fact, it had recorded an unthinkable event that very night. Something so damaging, so undeniably incriminating, that it would rock the entire Philadelphia Police Department to its core. Shortly after Alicia's release, Internal Affairs did indeed open an investigation. A detective named Marcus Wheeler, whom Alicia had never met, was assigned to her case. He was thorough, conscientious, and outspoken about corruption within the department. Wheeler quickly obtained the footage from Owens's body camera and began reviewing it. At first it was exactly what he expected, a seemingly routine traffic stop, culminating in an arrest that seemed unjustified based on Alicia's compliance and the lack of a real offense. But then, about 20 minutes later on the footage, after Alicia was already taken to the precinct, something else appeared. Wheeler was transfixed. He leaned closer to his monitor, rewound, played it again. At a certain point, Officer Owens, apparently having forgotten to switch off the body cam, walked into a dimly lit corridor in the police station. He rummaged through a few items on a desk. Then the camera's audio picked up a shocking conversation between Owens and another unknown individual. The voices were hushed, but they were discussing planting evidence in a separate, ongoing case. Someone else had been arrested for a more serious crime that night, and Owens was bragging about how easy it was to seal the deal by adding extra contraband to the suspect's personal effects. My word against his, Owens could be heard saying with a wry laugh on the footage. I know exactly how to frame it. I've done it before. Detective Wheeler froze, chills rippling up his spine. This was not just a corrupt officer's slip of the tongue. It was a confession, apparently. A confession that he'd planted evidence before, potentially on multiple occasions. Wheeler felt a mix of outrage and grim validation. He'd heard rumors about certain officers padding evidence, especially in narcotics busts, to guarantee convictions. But hearing Owens speak so blatantly confirmed a brazen disregard for justice, the detective realized that not only had Alicia Carter been wronged, but there was an entire web of wrongdoing waiting to be exposed. He swiftly documented the footage, downloaded multiple copies to secure drives, and alerted the chain of command. The reaction was immediate. Word reached the police commissioner's office. The name Officer Bradley Owens triggered recollections of prior complaints. Commissioner Danielle Outlaw, who in real life had taken the helm with a mandate to root out corruption and improve community relations, was left in a precarious position. The department was already under scrutiny for other controversies. This bombshell could not be ignored. The meltdown would be unstoppable if the public discovered an officer admitting on camera to planting evidence. That set off a chain of frantic department meetings. Some feared the scandal would tear open wounds between law enforcement and the public. Others demanded immediate disciplinary action. Amid the chaos, Detective Wheeler made his stance clear. We have to do the right thing. This cannot be brushed under the rug. Miss Carter's complaint is only one piece of a bigger puzzle. Officer Owens is a ticking time bomb. The highest brass knew that if they tried to hush this up and it leaked, it could sink careers, possibly even end in a federal probe. So they went the route of official procedure with caution. Owens was quietly placed on administrative leave pending an investigation. That same day, Alicia Carter received an unexpected phone call from an internal affairs official. They informed her that the department had discovered significant violations by Officer Owens, and that they would welcome her cooperation in a broader case. Alicia's mind reeled. She pressed for details, but they gave her little. They only said that her initial complaint was being taken very seriously, and the next day she received an invitation to appear at a special hearing. She swallowed her nerves. Part of her was glad that something might actually happen. Another part was apprehensive. Would there be retaliation? News of Officer Owens's administrative leave began to circulate within the department, and soon the rumor mill spilled into the community. A local news station, WPVI-TV Channel 6, caught wind that something was brewing. A reporter named Stephanie Adams, who had covered the police beat for years, got a tip about damning body cam footage. She dug deeper, eventually landing on Alicia's story of wrongful arrest. Through contacts in the legal community, Stephanie found Alicia's phone number. When Alicia picked up the call one afternoon, she wasn't prepared for the onslaught of questions. "Miss Carter, we understand you filed a complaint against Officer Bradley Owens. Is it true that footage reveals he made racially charged comments? Were you aware the department is investigating him for planting evidence? Do you have any comment on what happened that night?" Alicia nearly dropped her phone. Planting evidence? That was the first time she'd heard anything specific. Her mind raced with images of the humiliating traffic stop. She recalled the arrogance in his eyes, his unconcealed contempt. The possibility that he had done even worse to others fueled her righteous anger. Rather than unleash a flurry of statements, Alicia told the reporter she had no immediate comment, but might speak publicly if certain conditions were met. She reached out to Jasmine, her attorney friend, and explained everything. Together, they agreed that if they wanted real change, they should bring Alicia's story into the public eye. The risk was high, but the system often only responded when enough people demanded accountability. Alicia decided on a measured approach. First, she would appear at the departmental hearing, present her testimony, and see how the internal process handled it. If the department tried to minimize her complaint or bury the footage, she would go public with everything she knew. The hearing took place in a stuffy conference room within police headquarters. Seated around a large table were top officials, an internal affairs panel, departmental lawyers, and 2 community representatives from the Police Advisory Commission. Alicia sat across from them, poised but visibly tense. Detective Wheeler was there too, giving her a nod of reassurance. He had prepared a careful timeline of events and compiled segments from Owens's body cam footage. As the hearing began, Alicia repeated her story: the baseless stop, the intimidation, the wrongful arrest. Her voice quivered at times, but she maintained composure. She also described how frightened and helpless she had felt, the reality of being a black woman at the mercy of an officer who showed her no respect. A hush fell as she concluded. Then, one of the internal affairs officers pressed a button to play a portion of the body cam video. On the screen, they saw Owens approach Alicia's car, shining the flashlight in her eyes. His barked commands and abrupt tone were jarringly different from Alicia's calm politeness. The panel watched him pat her down and place her in cuffs with no clear cause. Graveness settled over the room. Alicia glanced at the community representatives, noticing their expressions shift between outrage and sorrow. Then came the second part of the footage time-stamped, around 20 minutes later. The hush in the room turned to pin-drop silence. There was Owens, rummaging through a desk in a dim corridor, conversing with an unknown voice. The audio was somewhat muffled, but distinctly clear enough to catch Owens boasting about making sure evidence lined up. The unknown voice asked if he was worried about the body cam, to which Owens responded in a slurred tone. He might have been half joking or half arrogant. "I turned it off, probably. If not, I'll handle that too." When the clip ended, no one spoke for a moment. Alicia's heart pounded in her chest. She had just witnessed an official revelation that Officer Owens was involved in planting or manipulating evidence. She glanced at the departmental lawyers. Their faces betrayed alarm, as though a nuclear bomb had dropped. Everyone realized that this hearing was no longer just about Alicia's harassment. It was about systemic corruption and the liability that could come crashing down on the city. Finally, one of the internal affairs officers cleared his throat. "Miss Carter, based on this footage, we believe you were indeed wrongfully arrested. Furthermore, it appears Officer Owens has engaged in criminal conduct and potential civil rights violations. We're prepared to recommend immediate charges against him. As for your complaint, it will definitely result in departmental action. Owens will be terminated." Pending this investigation, a swirl of relief and triumph welled inside Alicia, but it was accompanied by a wave of sadness that such a thing had happened at all. She found a steady voice. "Thank you. I appreciate that the department is taking this seriously, but I hope you understand, this is bigger than just me. Officer Owens has likely done this to others." One of the community representatives nodded vigorously. "We intend to find out, Miss Carter." The hearing concluded with that somber promise. Alicia left the conference room feeling lighter, but also stunned by the revelation. Her wrongful arrest would likely fade into the background of a much larger scandal, and she was determined not to let other victims remain silent. In the days that followed, the department suspended Owens without pay. The district attorney's office, led by Larry Krasner in Philadelphia, received the full file from internal affairs. Krasner's team commenced a criminal investigation into possible evidence tampering and civil rights violations. The story broke in local media outlets. Body cam footage exposes alleged police misconduct. The headlines screamed. The public, already weary of policing controversies, erupted with fury, particularly among communities of color. Journalists scoured Owens's record, finding a pattern of suspicious arrests, especially in drug-related incidents. Over a dozen prior complaints emerged from the dust, including some which had been dismissed without a thorough review. Each day, new allegations surfaced from individuals who claimed Owens harassed them or fabricated charges. One middle-aged man insisted that Owens had planted a small bag of narcotics in his car during a traffic stop years ago. Another woman claimed Owens beat her brother in an alley and threatened to arrest her if she recorded the assault on her phone. Many voices, once drowned out, now clamored to be heard. Alicia's story, ironically, became the catalyst that encouraged them to step forward. While the scandal rippled across Philadelphia, Alicia found herself dealing with a whirlwind of attention. Cameras followed her whenever she left Youth Rising headquarters. Activists urged her to give speeches. Civil rights groups reached out, praising her courage. At times, it was overwhelming. She felt haunted by that humiliating night, remembering the terror of being handcuffed for no legitimate reason. But she also felt a growing sense of purpose, a determination to channel her ordeal into meaningful change. A few weeks after the hearing, Alicia was invited by the local chapter of the NAACP to share her experience at a town hall. With her attorney friend Jasmine at her side, Alicia stepped onto a small stage in a packed community center. Faces from all walks of life gazed up at her fellow activists, families who'd lost loved ones to police violence, and even some off-duty officers who wanted to build trust in the neighborhoods they served. Alicia spoke of what it felt like to be singled out, how injustice festers, and how vital accountability is for healing. She stressed that change wouldn't come from hatred of all police, but rather from rooting out those who abused power. Her words resonated. The crowd erupted in applause multiple times. By the end, Alicia felt tears well in her eyes, a mixture of sorrow for the pain so many had endured, and hope that this might lead to real reforms. She recalled how helpless she'd felt in that holding cell, and now she stood in front of a crowd, her voice amplified. Meanwhile, the investigation into Owens moved swiftly. Evidence mounted that he had faked probable cause in numerous incidents, manipulated body cam footage in the past, and even coerced informants to lie. His arrogance had shielded him for years, but ironically, it was his own body cam that finally sealed his downfall. Prosecutors built a multi-count indictment against him, including civil rights violations, obstruction of justice, and perjury. The district attorney's office even considered a racketeering angle, given the breadth of his misconduct. When charges were formally announced, media outlets recorded every moment. A grim-faced Bradley Owens appeared in court, escorted by federal marshals. The high bail set by the judge underscored the severity of the accusations. Stunned journalists crowded outside the courthouse, capturing footage of the once confident officer, now stewing in humiliating defeat. The very same system he had exploited was reeling him into its nets. Alicia watched the coverage from her living room. She felt a swirl of emotions: relief, validation, and a lingering sadness for the entire city. No part of her had ever wished for someone's life to be ruined, but she couldn't ignore the fact that people like Owens thrived on oppression. Removing him from the force was absolutely necessary. The department, for its part, scrambled to enact damage control. The commissioner made public statements promising reforms, improved training, and thorough audits of body cam protocols. Critics of law enforcement, however, remained skeptical. One officer got caught, they said, but how many others are doing the same thing? The blow to public trust was immense, and it would take more than words to restore any semblance of confidence. Civil suits flooded the courts from individuals claiming wrongful arrests or convictions tied to Owens. Alicia filed her own lawsuit with Jasmine's assistance, not just for personal damages, but also to force structural changes. She demanded the department guarantee more transparency in body cam operations and create an external oversight board to review all claims of police misconduct. The lawyers for the city balked at first, but public pressure and the weight of the scandal made them more receptive to a settlement that included reforms. As the legal wheels turned, Alicia discovered that her personal life had shifted drastically. She was no longer just a dedicated non-profit founder, she was a public figure in the fight for police accountability. Although she'd never sought the spotlight, she couldn't deny that a certain sense of purpose came from using her platform to challenge injustice. The kids at Youth Rising watched her in awe. She told them, "I stand up, not just for me, but for all of you, so that none of you have to go through what I did." Weeks rolled into months, and the case against Owens hurtled toward a trial. The district attorney's office uncovered more evidence: missing logs, tampered chain of custody documents, and witness testimonies from his ex-partner, who had often felt uneasy about Owens's behavior, but was too intimidated to speak up. It became clear that Owens had likely engaged in a pattern of racial profiling and fabricated arrests to inflate his statistics, thereby showcasing himself as a tough on-crime officer. He had been lauded by certain factions in the department for high arrest numbers, ironically receiving commendations for his productivity. Now, those commendations seemed like a sick joke. Prosecutors planned to call Alicia to testify, using her experience as a prime example of Owens's disregard for the law. She received an official subpoena, and though the idea of facing him in court made her uneasy, she was resolute. She wanted her voice heard. On the day of the trial, the courthouse corridors were bustling with reporters, protesters, and law students who came to observe a potentially landmark case. Alicia arrived dressed in a simple yet dignified outfit, accompanied by Jasmine. A swirl of cameras flashed as they entered. Inside, the courtroom was lined with wooden benches. The prosecution's team presented its opening arguments, outlining Owens's alleged corruption. Then came a parade of witnesses, each painting a damning portrait of an officer who repeatedly abused his power. Finally, Alicia took the stand. Her hands felt clammy, her pulse rapid. Under the gentle guidance of the prosecution, she recounted the details of that fateful night. She described the humiliating pat-down, the baseless arrest, and how she was tossed into a cell for hours. She explained how, had the body cam not existed, and had a fortuitous chain of events not led to the full footage, being reviewed, her complaint might have disappeared into the bureaucratic void. Midway through her testimony, Alicia locked eyes with Owens. He sat at the defense table, dressed in a suit rather than a uniform. The smug arrogance that once radiated from him was gone, replaced by a simmering resentfulness. Alicia felt a tremor run through her, remembering how frightened she'd been that night. But now, in the bright glare of the courtroom, she was no longer powerless. On cross-examination, the defense tried to imply that Alicia's memory of the events might be skewed by her preconceived notion of police racism. They hinted that perhaps the arrest was a misunderstanding, yet Alicia remained poised, referencing the body cam footage that clearly showed she was not resisting or violating any laws. The defense had little ground to stand on. When she stepped down from the stand, a wave of release washed over her. She had told her truth under oath, refusing to shrink from intimidation. She returned to the gallery, exhaling deeply, Jasmine giving her a reassuring pat on the back. The trial took several days, but the outcome was almost a foregone conclusion. The evidence was overwhelming, especially the portion of the body cam footage capturing Owens bragging about planting evidence. It was, as the prosecutor described, a smoking gun. The jury deliberated for a mere few hours before returning a verdict, guilty on multiple counts, including civil rights violations and falsifying evidence. The judge, in a somber tone, called Owens's crimes a grave betrayal of public trust. The final sentence was severe years in federal prison, along with restitution and the stripping of his pension. As he was led away in handcuffs, Alicia watched from the gallery, trying to process the moment. Justice had been served, at least in this case. Still, she couldn't forget that many others faced injustices without such a clean resolution. Outside the courthouse, a throng of reporters and onlookers had gathered. When the prosecutor announced the verdict, cheers broke out from protesters holding signs calling for accountability. Alicia emerged, blinking at the midday sun, feeling the collective release of tension in the crowd. She never liked the idea of celebrating someone's downfall, but she understood the catharsis of seeing an abusive figure brought to justice. Reporters swarmed her. Microphones hovered near her face. "Miss Carter, do you have any statement about today's verdict?" She held her head high. "I'm relieved by the outcome, but one verdict isn't enough. We need ongoing oversight, accountability, and transparency to rebuild trust between law enforcement and the communities they serve. This is a start, a small step toward justice, Her words were picked up on every local newscast. It became the snippet repeated on the evening broadcasts, highlighting both the victory and the need for continued reforms. In the aftermath, Alicia and Jasmine proceeded with their civil lawsuit. The city agreed to a settlement that included not only monetary compensation for Alicia, but also a binding agreement to adopt stringent new protocols for body cam management and to bolster the oversight board's authority. Alicia insisted that part of the funds go towards supporting Youth Rising, her non-profit. She wanted to transform her personal nightmare into something that might offer a beacon of hope for the next generation. While the city took steps to implement reforms, Alicia remained vigilant. She spoke at community meetings, forging alliances with other activists. Her renown grew beyond Philadelphia, and she was invited to panels discussing police accountability nationwide. And though she sometimes longed for the quiet, unassuming life she'd led before the harassment, she also understood that history had thrust her into a pivotal role. She wouldn't abandon that responsibility. A few months later, Alicia stood outside Youth Rising's modest building in West Philadelphia. They were hosting another job fair, an even bigger event than the one she'd been planning the night of her wrongful arrest. This time, the fair had garnered widespread attention, drawing local businesses, non-profits, city council members, and newly reformed police liaison officers eager to build bridges. The air buzzed with positivity. Teens shuffled in with smiles and cautious optimism. Alicia roamed among them, offering encouragement, introducing them to prospective employers. While she chatted with a local teachers' union rep, she noticed a figure approaching a tall, lanky man in plain clothes. He extended a hand politely, introducing himself as Detective Marcus Wheeler, the same internal affairs investigator who had dug up the crucial body cam footage. He told her he wanted to see the positive outcomes of her organization's work, especially since she had fought so hard for justice. They walked through the event together, discussing not only the scandal, but the changes that had begun taking place in the department. Wheeler admitted that rooting out corruption was a constant struggle, but the Owens case had rattled many complacent officers. The hope was that fear of real accountability would deter others from abusing their power. Alicia nodded, acknowledging that true reform needed vigilance, but she was grateful for honest officers like Wheeler. By the day's end, the job fair was a rousing success. Dozens of teens lined up for interviews, forging connections that could shift the course of their lives. As Alicia locked up the building with the last volunteers, she felt a swelling pride. The memory of that dark, humiliating night still lingered, but now it felt like a turning point rather than a tragedy. She had endured trauma, discovered a hidden realm of corruption, and by standing up for herself, inadvertently exposed a malignant force within the system. The city was far from perfect, but a step forward had been taken. What Alicia didn't know was how many individuals, once silenced by their own fear, had found the courage to come forward after hearing her story. They, too, demanded accountability for years of injustices. The wheels of the system, rusty and long stuck, had finally begun to move. As she turned off the lights, Alicia quietly thanked the Philadelphia skyline, glowing in the distance. It was a city of grit and hope. And on that sweltering summer night, when she had been handcuffed without reason, it was also the city where, in a twist of fate, the very evidence needed to dismantle a cruel pattern of abuse was recorded by the offender's own device. Such irony had transformed the course of many lives and lit a spark for change that continued to burn. Alicia Carter's ordeal and the body cam footage that exposed Officer Bradley Owens stands as a powerful testament to the need for vigilance in our justice system. One unjust traffic stop propelled an entire city toward a reckoning, revealing deep-rooted corruption and fueling reforms that promised a better future. Though the road to healing is long, Alicia's unwavering pursuit of the truth showed how individual courage can topple institutional harm. Now, we must continue shining a light on every hidden corner and holding those in power accountable. Each of us has a role to play in demanding transparency, supporting community initiatives, and amplifying stories like Alicia's. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If you found inspiration or learned something from this story, please like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. Together, we can spark much-needed change, one voice at a time.